Hello everybody. This is a little bit of a different video, kind of a discussion, but also kind of a more of a nostalgic sort of thing. And it's in relation to a Facebook status post I put up earlier this afternoon when I was at work on my break. And basically the status, for those that may not have seen it yet, basically it basically went around the lines of I miss being a kid. I miss the 90's. I miss the simpler times of being a kid and all that what came with being a kid, like sleepovers, bike rides, playing video games to your heart's content without any sort of waiting hours for the game to update itself or a patch or something like that. And the incredible amount of great cartoons and putty cats, great cartoons and films that came out during that time. Now, obviously, I was born in '89, and basically the 90's was pretty much my childhood, of course. So I know most people that know me would have, they would have known a life before the modern day distractions took over, like social media, YouTube, Facebook, all that kind of jazz, and apps and tablets and all that kind of stuff that's really taken. I feel technology has robbed kids of a childhood. I won't say every child is the same. I would say some adults would really try to get their kids to enjoy what they enjoyed as a kid, get them to go out, get them to meet friends, go for bike rides. I think some adults, some parents would actually probably try to strive to get kids to be more active and also to enjoy stuff from like our time. Obviously you can't force kids to like the same thing, of course, but you can at least give them a chance with it, and if they like it, then fine. But I feel I'm kind of glad I grew up at a time, part of a generation of kids that knew what it was like to be a kid. There wasn't any unnecessary distractions. Technology was still relatively primitive. We were just getting into the 16-bit graphics with video games. When I was a kid, I remember the original Game Boy, the black and white, and I remember the Game Boy Color coming out, the Game Boy Advance coming out. But I think the Game Boy Advance came out when I was a bit older. I think that came out in the 2000s time or late 90's. But anyway, I remember the original Game Boy, the old black and white, and I also remember the Game Boy Color. But as a kid, I never had a Game Boy, except for a Game Boy Advance. I remember I got a Game Boy Advance when I was probably about, I don't know, I can't actually remember when that came out now. But I think I was probably just shy of my teens. Probably still a kid, but probably more shy of my teens when that came out. And I remember having that. And I used to have the PS1. I used to have a Sega as well. I think was it? No, not a Sega. No, I had a PS1, which was the very first console my parents ever bought me. And then my dad got me, it was second hand, of course, he got me an old Atari. And that got me into the old 8-bit, like really old type graphics. So I kind of grew up with that type kind of phase. Anything that was a video game, I would quite happily spend hours playing it. And I really liked the idea of cartridge games, where it's basically the game is on a cartridge, like a chipboard, like a motherboard thing kind of thing inside the cartridge, and you plug it in, and away you go. And also, I was really, really fond of my PS1 as well. I still have my original PS1, funnily enough. I don't know if it still works. And I keep meaning to fire it up and see if it works. I do have two of them, and for the life of me, I cannot remember why I have two. But if one doesn't work, I suppose we could swap out parts. We could kind of like use the second one for parts to maybe fix what's maybe broken on the other one. So at least I could actually get one fully functional one out of two, really, if it came to it. I also have my Atari as well that I had. I can't remember what the Atari was now. I can't remember what it was called, but I still have it as well. But anyway, so yeah, the whole point of this was, I was feeling quite not lethargic. I was feeling quite, nostalgic. There we go. I was feeling quite, nostalgic, thinking to myself, and actually, what actually prompted this thought process is I was actually on Instagram, funnily enough. And I was on Instagram and I was just going through the reels, going through the videos people have put up. And there was this reel of basically kids of the 90s. I would like to go back to that time. And it was basically pictures of the 90s, of course, basically saying we didn't care of, not every picture we took was Instagram perfect. Like family holidays and things like that. There were like really some pictures were taken that were quite crudely done, but yet there's a charm to those photos. They're still special, even though they aren't, done properly. They're not professionally done, of course. They're amateur. Things of that nature, and playing video games, going for bike rides, sleepovers with mates, things of that nature. And it just got me thinking to my childhood. I mean, even though I would not like to go back to school again. I would like, when I was a kid, me and school did not get on very well. I had one of the worst times. Well, I won't say. I think a few people will agree that school isn't the best place for everybody. Or at least it wasn't a great experience for everybody. My school days were quite harsh. Obviously, I was bullied. I also had a lot of problems with teachers, because basically, obviously, I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic. They're both very different things. One's to do with balance and coordination, which is dyspraxia, and dyslexia is learning. Difficulty with basically dyslexia is more for well, there's a lot of things that go into dyslexia, but the main common thing is reading, writing, and understanding numeracy, like numbers and things like that. People with dyslexia, or that are dyslexic, have difficulty understanding things like that. And of course, when I was at school, I was below national. I was below national average for my age and for the year I was in. I really struggled to read and write. My reading age was ridiculously low for my age. So basically, I had to work my ass off with a teacher's aid. And also, when I got into high school, I had like private lessons with actual people that were specially trained to deal with special needs when it came to learning difficulties and stuff. And so yeah, basically, when I was back in the 90s, so this is when I was at primary school, I got tested by the school nurse. Finally, my mum got through to some gumption when it came to my head teacher, head teacher at primary, and he actually put it forward and said, yes, I think in his testing we think he could maybe just be dyslexic, and of course I was. And now that the teachers finally knew that I wasn't taking the piss, I wasn't being attention seeking and all this, that, and the other that they tried to see me as. And And yeah, it wasn't a good time for me at school because the teachers were against me quite a lot, thinking I was just wasting time, being a nuisance, and not listening and all that kind of thing. And it wasn't that; it's because I just couldn't understand what was going on. I found, obviously I couldn't read, I couldn't write, I couldn't do anything. And maths, Jesus Christ, don't even go anywhere near me with maths. Even to this day, I struggle with maths. But I think majority of people struggle with maths. I think, and not everybody's bloody Carol Vorderman. Let's just put it that way. Um, but yeah, so it's one of them things. But anyway, so basically, school was a shit show for me. For being bullied, and then teachers thinking I was just a waste of space. Teachers telling me that I probably won't amount to anything in life. I probably found it difficult to find a job, which really pissed my parents up and upset my mother and everything, and concerned them. But to be honest, I worked my ass off through school. I worked my ass off thanks to teachers' aides and explaining stuff to me. My reading age went up quite well. My reading, grammar, writing, punctuation, all that stuff was a lot better. It improved a lot by the time I went to high school. And then my maths improved a little bit, even though even to this day I struggle with maths. I struggle with things like division, algebra, anything that's like to do with equations and things like that. I cannot get my head around. Uh, I can deal with addition, subtraction, and basic multiplication. But anything more advanced than that, then I'll struggle. Um, but anyway, so yeah, I just miss those simpler times. You know what I mean? I just miss those simpler times of when, oh, man, I miss just that. I miss that time period. The 90's was a great decade. It really was. Some people may vary. People that are older than me will remember like growing up probably through the mid to late 70's, throughout the 80's. So by the time I was born, most of the people that I know were probably about 20, 15, 10-year old by the time I was born. That because like I say, I know quite a few people that are much older than me, of course, by about maybe a good 10-year-old or more older than me. Excuse me. but the thing is like obviously through the 90's we got a lot of reruns as well. Thanks to when Sky launched, when it first launched here in the UK, which was back in, I think I would have been about 8 or 9 when we got Sky, because I remember when the renaissance of kids' TV really changed. Around about the mid 90's to about 2001 was kind of like a renaissance point in time when kids' TV really started to change. But in a good way, not in a bad way. Obviously, like I said, I grew up having Sky. Like I said, I must have been about at least 7 or 8 years old when we got it for the first time. So I remember Fox Kids, I remember Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, all that jazz, and I remember Disney Channel launching for the first time as well, which says I'm old, because I remember Disney Channel launching. I remember them launching Toon Disney as well, which has become something else, I think, in recent years. But anyway, I remember 2 Disney channels starting up for the first time, which was probably during probably again late 90's, early 2000s when that all did happened. So obviously, I remember coming home from school, and I would just, even though I've had a shit day at school, a very repetitive day of being bullied and being made to feel worthless, And I would come home from school and I would just absorb myself. I would just immerse myself, should I say, immerse myself in these stories, in these adventures. And I would watch hours upon hours and hours of TV. And thanks to that, I got introduced to classic Hanna-Barbera stuff, like the Flintstones, the Jetsons, Captain Caveman, Josie and the Pussycats, bloody hell, Tom and Jerry, original Tom and Jerry, as well as Tom and Jerry Kids. So many different older stuff that came out like in the 60s, 70s. And then obviously I grew up with Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls, Sailor Moon when that came out, original Digimon, um, so many stuff. And then obviously with Disney Channel, obviously I grew up with Recess. I grew up with Recess, Lloyd in Space, Kim Possible, and so on and so on. I could go on forever. And there was so much good stuff. Nearly every single show I watched was a banger. It was very rare that I would turn my nose to something. Everything I was really engrossed in. Everything at that point in time just seemed to be an absolute banger. It just caught my attention straight away. That's where my love for animation came from, and that's where my love for art as well. I grew a massive interest in drawing and art, through watching this stuff. And then obviously there was the insurgence of Japanese cartoons coming over to the UK and to America for the first time. Well, not for the first time, but like the 90s and the early 2000s really was kind of renaissance point for Japanese cartoons or media to really start hitting the Western market and the Western audiences. And obviously I grew up with Pokemon, of course, and Digimon, which were both Japanese, of course, and obviously I also, just said Sailor Moon, Card Captors, and then obviously the year 2000, I think it was when Cartoon Network decided to drop a late night block, which would later become Adult Swim. And then obviously Adult Swim's now a separate entity now, I believe. But Adult Swim was originally, I think, a Cartoon Network creation, and they started Toonami. It was a late night block, and it was originally started with Toonami, and then Adult Swim, I think, came a little bit later, but Toonami anyway. And that introduced me to stuff like Dragon Ball Z and the Gundam Wing and the Big O and all these incredible shows that I'd never seen the lights of this incredible animation style coming out. And so yeah, I got a very broad. I'm so goddamn lucky to have been born when I did, because I wouldn't say I would have missed out, but I saw all this stuff firsthand. You know what I mean? I saw all this stuff air in the UK firsthand for the first time ever. Not a rerun, not something that came out like 10 years ago. I saw it all happen firsthand, and that's what makes it special. And of course, there was incredible films like The Lion King. There was Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 1 was 98. 94, The Lion King came out. So I think I must have gone to see that for my birthday, because I would have been just turning 5. So I would have been about 5 when I saw The Lion King, and I would have been about 8 years old when Toy Story came out. And then obviously The Bug's Life and all these different stuff from Pixar and Disney, which was coming out, and I was just absolutely in awe. Literally, I bonded with me and my mum bonded over this stuff. But me and my mum bonded over the old Disney, over the Disney films, and DreamWorks stuff like Shrek and all that. And anything that was animated, my mum would jump at the chance to check it out and watch it with me when I was a kid, and it was a special time, like a bonding experience between mum and son, and all that kind of thing. And it was a special time. You know, it really was a special time. It was a special decade. Yeah, no doubt there was stuff going on politically on the news and everything that was necessarily, obviously, but well, in the year, well, it was 89 when the Berlin Wall fell, wasn't it? The dividing wall in Germany between West and East Germany, and I think they had the Berlin Wall, I believe it was called. And when that got demolished, when the people started knocking it down, I was born that year, so that was something of finally Germany were whole again after the whole post-war thing, after what happened with the war and all that. And a lot of stuff happened during the 90's when it came to the news and stuff, and some bad stuff, some good stuff. The Falklands War, I think, was during the 90's, I believe. Was it 80's? It was 80's, because I remember it was Maggie Thatcher, wasn't it? As Prime Minister. So, but anyway, but yeah, there was stuff going on. I think it was the Gulf War in the 90's, wasn't it? I'm trying to remember stuff on top of my head, what happened politically, but I don't really take notice of that stuff anymore. Oh, really. But no, it's just the point of this is I miss those days. I miss those times of just endlessly playing video games and finally being introduced to Grand Theft Auto at a very young age. Of course, I was still a child. When I had that, when I got the first Grand Theft Auto game I got was GTA 3 for the PS2. And I was just in awe of this game. And then obviously San Andreas came out, which is literally my favourite GTA game ever. Even though Grand Theft Auto, the newer one, GTA 5, is a great game, don't get me wrong. But San Andreas is just pinnacle Grand Theft Auto for me. It is just pinnacle. The stuff you could do, you could literally go into any building, you can go to top of roofs, and it was just such fun. And the endless amounts of, oh God, I wasted so much time on that game. It was unreal, and I never completed it. I've never completed any GTA game because because I was just too busy doing stuff you shouldn't be. I was too busy going around the map and causing mayhem and putting cheat codes in as you did and all that. There was some great games as well and some great systems. I mean, unfortunately, the only thing back in the day when I was a kid that I didn't experience firsthand was other game consoles. The only game consoles I ever got as a kid was the PS1, the PS2, and a Atari that my dad got me. And they were literally the only three that my parents bought me when I was a kid. And they're the only systems I have most nostalgia for. And of course, as well, I said earlier on in the video that I had a Game Boy Advance, which as well. So they were the only four video game systems that I actually, that I actually had as a kid. And so I never grew up with the Sega Mega Drive, the Genesis, the SNES. Well, of course, these are before me. The SNES is anyway. But the fact is, I never had first-hand experience with other game systems that came out during the 90's, like the GameCube and the Dreamcast and things like that. I never actually got. Basically my cousins, my brother's kids on my dad's side. My cousins on my dad's side, they had the Dreamcast and a GameCube, and a friend of mine also had a GameCube. So I've had a play on I played a game on those systems, but I've never owned them because my parents were in this mindset of, well, what's the point? You've already got this game console. Why did you want that for? I said, well, this is a completely different console with totally different games. You can't play those games on here because these are literally exclusively just for the GameCube or just for the Dreamcast or whatever. And my parents just couldn't get their heads around the fact of these are different systems for a reason. They've got different games that I'd love to play, like Metroid and all that stuff. And you know, and then obviously as I got older, I obviously started working and got my first job anyway, which was my first job was actually a steward at KC. Well, it's now MKM Stadium where Hull City play. And through with that money and birthday money and that, I bought myself the PS3. And ever since then, I just bought myself the consoles when I could afford it. And but yeah, but you know, it's just I miss those times. I'm glad I grew up I grew up and was part of a generation of kids that knew what it was like to be a child, be a kid, have fun, just go nuts and go for little adventures with friends, go for bike rides, sleepovers, watching great cartoons and films and stuff at the time. You know, it was just such a great time, and I miss it. There we are. Thanks for watching, people. Take care. And now I'm going to, remember I am no longer a child. We all have to grow up. But obviously we all have to grow up physically. We don't necessarily have to grow up in here. I'm still a big kid at heart. I will not change anytime soon. I'm quite, I still watch stuff from my childhood for a bit of nostalgia. Like at the moment, I'm watching a bit of Pokemon, the original Pokemon. So, I still revisit this stuff, and of course I still watch cartoons and animation even now, because I still love it. It's one of my favourite mediums next to video games and stuff. And, so... But anyway, there we have it. Thank you. Take care, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Bye-bye.